I thought I was just being a good mother that morning, taking my son's cracked phone to get it fixed before he noticed. But the moment the technician, a family friend, looked at the screen, his face drained of color. He quietly pulled me aside and said, "Cancel your credit cards. Change your locks. Tonight." My heart stopped. I asked, "Why? What's going on?" He turned the phone toward me, and there it was, scheduled messages written by my own son, planning every detail of what would happen after my death. My hands went cold. The shop was silent, but inside me, something shattered. Before I share my story, I'd love to know you are here with me and listening to me. Comment. Hi below, or tell me where you're from. I love hearing how far my story reaches. Sometimes knowing someone is there makes all the difference. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. If you find my story hard to hear but worth remembering, please subscribe. Every listener helps my voice stay alive. My name is Juniper Slate, and this is how I learned that love can save you or destroy you one text message at a time. I was halfway out the door with Cass's cracked iPhone and my canvas tote on my shoulder when the cold Santa Fe air slapped me awake, dry blue and merciless. Camino Real was all sun-bleached adobe and creaking gates. The neon at Pacheco Tech and Repair buzzed a tired green. Diego looked up from a disassembled laptop, that familiar half-smile dying the second he saw the phone. Passcode, he asked, casual. "Same as always," I said, and my stomach sank as I spoke it. My mother's birthday, the code Cass has used for everything since he was 12. Routine is a comfort until it becomes a roadmap. Diego's thumbs flicked the new test screen lit, and then I watched his face empty out. He slid the front door latch, flipped the sign to closed, and lowered his voice. "Juniper, you need to cancel your cards. Change your locks. Tonight." I felt my palms go cold. What happened? He turned the iPhone toward me and opened a tab I didn't even know existed. Scheduled messages. 7 of them, clean as a calendar, all addressed to MV across the next 3 months. I read the first 2 with the numb concentration of a librarian parsing an obituary for facts. Life insurance is ready. Her signature's on file. Dr. Kincaid documented confusion. If they ask later, there's a pattern. After the funeral, liquidate the house. Probate 6 to 8 weeks. Day G 1201. Scottsdale is ready. The words were so clinical they felt less like speech and more like instruments set out on a tray. Diego's hand hovered near the bench vise, like he needed something heavy to hold. I'll put the phone back together like we never looked. You hear me, but don't confront him. Not yet. I kept my voice steady. 37 years of library reference desks will teach you how to keep your face quiet. Screenshots, I said. Send them to the email I gave your wife when she had pneumonia, the encrypted one. He nodded, took photos fast, and I stared at the neat little timestamps as if I could will them to rearrange. "Who is MV?" I asked. Diego's jaw tightened. "I don't know. I don't want to guess wrong." The bell over the door stayed silent as I stepped back onto Pacheco and felt the high desert sun press hard on my shoulders. I tucked the repaired phone into my tote next to my notebook, pen, and handkerchief, my old tools, and walked home, rehearsing normal. At the adobe, the kitchen smelled like cumin and dust, and the copper pots my mother-in-law gave me the year Cass was born. Family photos lined the hallway in cheap frames that had survived a dozen summers. I wiped the counters, set out 2 mugs, and practiced breathing. The conflict set in like a fever breaking. Do I go to the police with messages, "A clever lawyer will call drafts," or do I build what I've always built, an airtight case from scattered facts? If he scheduled my death like a dental cleaning, then schedule is the one thing on my side. I changed nothing else. I left the phone where he usually left it. I folded dish towels. I kept the house's rhythms exact as heartbeat. When the lock turned, I caught my face in the oven glass and arranged it into the wife and mother expression I've worn so long it fits like skin. Cass came in with that quick smile he uses on nervous patients. "Hey, Ma," he said, bending to kiss my cheek. His lips were cold. He glanced toward the sideboard. The phone was there, screen black. "Where'd you go this morning?" he asked, dropping his keys in the bowl tone light as air. "I ran a few errands," I said, and the words fell between us, harmless as dimes, while a calendar no one could see began to count down. I kept dinner ordinary on purpose. Onions diced. Fine salmon, salted early, asparagus, snapping clean at the stem. You don't set off alarms in a house wired for suspicion. Cass drifted in and out of the kitchen phone, in hand voice lowered on a call that had the intimate cadence of a confession, but none of its content. When he stepped onto the portal to take better reception, I moved. His iPad sat charging on the credenza, still logged into iCloud, the same soft blue welcome screen I've shown 100 retirees at the library. My mother's birthday opened it like a door no one bothered to lock. I found the folder faster than I wanted to. Practice, Mingiamed inside, evaluation report placing his dental practice just shy of $2 million line items, neat as surgical sutures. A spreadsheet labeled Asset Liquidation, C01, 2025. My mouth went dry. Another folder. Health. A PDF stared up at me with a file name that chilled me in a way the desert can't. Cognitive Assessment, J. Slate 0912. PDF. The signature, my name, sat at the bottom in a handwriting close enough to fool a son, not a mother. September 12th. I clicked open my email on my own phone and pulled the hotel receipt from Albuquerque, and the selfie the conference coordinator insisted we take in front of a banner, big as a mattress. I sent both to my backup email and then to one more address. Cass doesn't know exists. I screenshotted every page of the PDF, my hands steady, because steadiness is a habit. I taught first graders to print their names, taught college kids to cite their sources. I can steady anything now, even this impression-mild cognitive impairment. Recommend family supervision. Dr. R. Kincaid. The phrase wasn't medical so much as narrative. It was a scaffolding you could build a tragedy on. Noise on the portal. Cass laughing. I closed the files, reopened the iPad to the home screen, and slid my notebook deeper into my tote. Back at the stove, I stirred onions until their edges went translucent and thought about the way stories get made official, not by truth, but by paper. When Cass came back in, he was glowing with the easy relief of a man who thinks his plan is working. "You use too much dill," he said, teasing, and stole a spear of asparagus before it hit the tray. I smiled. "You're the one who taught me to be generous with herbs." He leaned on the counter, watched me plate dinner. "We should talk about the house," he said, swiping at his phone with the casualness of an addict. "One story would be safer for you, fewer stairs, less for you to manage." He let the word hang just long enough to see if it would land. It didn't. "We'll talk after we eat," I said. He poured wine Pinot Noir, our holiday bottle, and his hand didn't shake. The glass nearest me had the faintest medicinal shadow, a whisper of sweetness where it didn't belong. He set it by my plate and kissed the top of my head. "To making things easier," he said, raising his own glass. I lifted mine, let the stem touch my fingers, then set it back down with a smile I've used on toddlers and trustees alike. He didn't notice when I palmed the glass cross to the sink and tipped it into the potted rosemary while the faucet hissed loud to cover the sound. The room went quiet the way rooms do when the facts finally arrive and there's nothing left to imagine. After dinner, he took a shower, humming. I moved through the hall like a woman straightening frames, and in his room the laptop's sleep light blinked a drowsy pulse. The same passcode opened it. I skimmed for what I already knew existed and still felt sick when I found it a draft email to MV Scottsdale invoice okay. After funeral, 6 to 8 weeks, probate everything clean. It was the word that caught me. No blood, no accident, just a tidy ledger. I captured the screen, forwarded it, then backed out to the valuation attachment, again scanning line items, until my eye snagged on a note, Kincaid letter on file. The story had been written down to the props. In my small office off the kitchen, the room with a squeaky chair and a metal file cabinet I never got around to painting, I opened my notebook and built the only thing that's ever saved me a timeline. Scheduled messages October through January, day G1201, practice valuation 2 numbers, asset liquidation 1 2025, fake cognitive test dated 9/12 while I was in Albuquerque, doctor's impression mild impairment recommend family supervision, draft email to MV Scottsdale set, post-funeral probate window baked in. Under that, in smaller handwriting because it felt like a prayer, do not confront. Build case. Prepare for 72-hour psych hold attempt. I wrote Reese and Evan's names, my other children, then crossed them out. If Cass moved to commit me for evaluation using Kincaid's paper, any panicked call to their numbers could be rerouted into proof I was agitated. Silence is a kind of armor. Evidence is the only weapon. I sent everything to a backup account Diego's wife helped me set up years ago when she brought soup to my door in January and insisted I stop using the same password for recipes and banking. Then I printed the Albuquerque receipt and tucked it under the phone bill in the kitchen drawer where I keep warranties and stamps and a clip for coupons I always forget to use. When the shower cut off, I was back at the sink, rinsing plates like any other night in any other December. Cass came into the hall, damp hair, fresh shirt, the smell of my peppermint soap clinging to a man who used to crawl into my lap after bad dreams. He picked up his phone from the sideboard and scanned it without a flicker of worry. The passcode worked, the home screen looked the same. The scheduled messages slept exactly where he'd left them. He leaned in the doorway and tried again, softer. "Mom, I don't want you to feel like I'm pushing you. I just want you safe." I know I said drying a dish a second longer than I needed. His smile sharpened. "So maybe we tour some condos tomorrow, 1 story. Elevator, close to the plaza. Safer for you." He let the last 3 words ring a bell, tolling for someone else. I set the towel down and faced him, the copper pots throwing back a small, warped version of us both. "We'll see," I said. In my chest, the timeline clicked into place like teeth. Outside, the high desert wind lifted and fell against the adobe wall, and from somewhere far off, a train laid down a line of sound as straight and unforgiving as a signature. Maeve's office at the library always smelled like old paper and eucalyptus tea. I'd sat there countless mornings over the years helping retirees reset passwords and trace genealogy, but this time, the search wasn't for anyone's ancestors, it was for the woman behind my son's messages. The glow of the monitor softened Maeve's face as she typed. "Vale Holdings LLC," I said, sliding a scrap of paper toward her. "Check corporate records, Arizona and Colorado." Within minutes, she frowned. "Registered in Scottsdale. One principal, Morgan Vale. Filed as a financial consultant, but..." She clicked again. Her company bought out 3 dental practices. All 3 previous owners died within 6 months. Accidental overdose, car crash, fall from stairs. She turned the screen toward me. "Juniper, that's a pattern." Maeve pulled up a local article from Arizona dated 2 years back. A blurred photo of a crime scene, yellow tape, a white van, and behind it, half obscured, a woman in a pale suit, with dark hair twisted into a French knot. Even in grainy pixels, I knew the posture. The same sharp shoulders that leaned toward my son in every photo he'd ever let me see. I printed the article, underlined the key names with Maeve's dull pencil, folded it into my notebook. "I need to talk to her," I said. Maeve looked up sharply. "Juniper, that's insane." "No," I said, gathering my tote. "It's information." The rail trail lofts rose above the tracks like glass teeth. The smell of solvent hung heavy in the hallway, everything too new, too polished. I pressed the intercom. "It's Juniper Slate, Cass's mother." There was a pause, then a click, and the door buzzed open. Morgan's apartment was minimalist white walls, black couch, chrome table. The view from the wide window was the rail line stretching south, a silver thread cutting through desert dust. She wore a cream blouse, no jewelry, the kind of simplicity that costs money. So she said, handing me a glass of water, "You found me." I had to know why I said setting my tote on my lap. Inside the library's small digital recorder blinked red. Why do you need me gone? Morgan's smile didn't move past her lips. Let's not dramatize. I manage financial transitions. Cass hired me to help him move assets after, you know. After my funeral, I said flat. I read the messages. She didn't flinch. Then you understand. You're a practical woman. Things are already in motion. The insurance, the valuation, the doctor's report. You can make this easy. Help me file a complaint against Cass, make it look like he coerced you, and I'll ensure you walk away alive with a settlement even. And if I don't... Her tone didn't change. Then he might lose his nerve and slip. He's under pressure. I've seen it happen. Accidents are quick. She reached for her tablet, scrolling with a manicured nail. $750,000 already transferred to my LLC. That's not public money, Mrs. Slate. That's Cass buying my silence. I felt my heartbeat steady into something cold. You're blackmailing my son. I'm managing him, she said. He owes me, and I keep people on track. The narrative is simple, older woman. Mild cognitive issues, tragic fall at home. We even have Dr. Kincaid's notes ready. Who argues with a doctor? Her voice was soft, precise. The same cadence I'd heard from Cass when he spoke to nervous patients before pulling a tooth. I realized they shared a language, the vocabulary of calm destruction. I stood. You'll regret this. I already have. She said, eyes flicking toward the window as if someone might be watching. But it's too late for regrets. Midnight, Mrs. Slate? That's your deadline. If I don't hear from Cass by then, I assume you've chosen the hard way. I walked to the elevator. The mirrored wall caught her reflection, hands folded, expression serene, the faint curve of satisfaction on her mouth. The doors closed, and for a moment all I saw was my own face superimposed over hers, two women tied to the same man for entirely different reasons. Outside, the wind lifted dust across the parking lot. I kept one hand on my tote, feeling the recorder still warm inside. At home, I locked both doors, reset the code on the alarm, and wrote 3 new emails. The first to Maeve with the audio attached. The second to Diego's subject line in case I disappear. The third scheduled for my children Reese and Evan if I didn't check in by 11:45 p.m. The entire file would forward to the Santa Fe Police Department. Then I boiled water for coffee, moved the kitchen knives to the top shelf, and sat beneath the ticking clock listening to the house breathe around me. The desert night was silent, but the quiet felt electric, like the pause before lightning hits. I had less than a day to stay alive. By afternoon, the air inside the adobe turned heavy, the kind of stillness that makes you whisper without knowing why. Cass came home early, whistling softly as he laid 2 wine glasses on the table. Dr. Kincaid stopping by, he said. Just routine. He wants to check your memory, that's all. I kept my hand steady, slicing bread. My memory is fine. Then it'll be an easy visit. He smiled, that same professional curve he uses with patients. At 5:30, Kincaid arrived carrying a leather case and the faint smell of antiseptic. Juniper, he said too cheerfully. Just a few questions. His handwriting, sharp slanted, was the same I'd seen at the bottom of the forged PDF. He asked my full name, today's date, the season. I deliberately stumbled over the month, then recited word for word a passage from The Tempest that my mother taught me when I was 10. The room went still. Cass's grin froze. Kincaid's pen hesitated mid-stroke. I met his eyes until he looked away. Excellent, he said too quickly. We're done here. When they stepped into the hall, I stayed by the table, pretending to clear plates. Their voices carried through the half-open door. She had moments of confusion, Cass said. Kincaid murmured back, enough to justify supervision. We'll file an addendum. Good. We need her evaluated before she hurts herself. I lifted my phone, snapped a picture of the form he'd left behind, family observation recommended, written in Kincaid's hurried script. A draft death sentence disguised as medical advice. They left together, Cass, thanking him like an old friend. The door closed, their car engines faded. For a long moment, I just stood there. Then I found the courage to search the trash under the sink. Wedged between paper towels was a crumpled yellow note. Same handwriting, Scottsdale Complete maintains silence. My chest went hollow. This wasn't just Cass's greed anymore. It was a network. Morgan had bought the doctor. The circle was closing. I sat at the table staring at the half-empty wine glasses. Mine was untouched. His was half gone. The deep red stain on the rim looked almost black. It smelled faintly medicinal, again sweeter than it should. The thought flickered if I'd drunk it, they would have blamed medication interaction, an unfortunate slip. I poured it down the drain, watching it spiral away like blood diluted by water. When Cass returned an hour later, he was lighter relieved. "See, that wasn't so bad," he said, setting his phone down. "Dr. Kincaid says we'll just keep an eye on things. Maybe it's time to think about a safer environment, a care facility perhaps." I laughed softly. "You're moving fast. Just thinking ahead." He reached for my hand. "You'll thank me later." I kept my smile, gentle eyes soft with practiced affection. Inside, I was already designing my next performance. If they wanted confusion, I'd give them confusion just enough to lull them. Tomorrow I'd misplace my keys, forget the name of a street, mumble half a sentence at breakfast, let Cass believe he was winning. When he went to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen, the walls humming with the low sound of the desert wind. I sent Maeve a short message. "Keep everything safe. And if I call twice in a row, don't answer, just forward the file." Then I deleted the text. In the window's reflection, the woman staring back looked older than I remembered, hair pulled tight, eyes sharp. I thought of Morgan's smooth composure, Cass's steady hands, Kincaid's neat signature, each of them counting on the same lie that age makes you weak, that motherhood dulls the mind. I pressed my fingers against the cool glass. If they wanted a woman who didn't know what day it was, they were about to meet one who never forgot a single thing. Outside, a lone coyote called somewhere near the ridge. Inside, the clock ticked toward a midnight that felt closer every minute. I turned off the lights, left the wine glasses exactly where they were, and whispered to the empty room. "Tomorrow we play by my rules. I brought green chili stew to Cass's office, because that's what mothers do when they don't want anyone to smell the fire. The lobby was glass and chrome and too bright. Disinfectant hung in the air like a warning. He'll be right out," the receptionist chirped, then added without thinking, "Ms. Morgan just left." The name landed like a drop tray. I set the bag on the counter and walked the corridor I've walked 100 times for cleanings and crowns. His door was half closed. A blue glow washed the desk, and on the monitor sat a contract with a logo I knew too well, Vale Holdings. Purchase agreement signatures cued February closing proceeds to transfer on acceptance of seller's representations. I leaned closer. An addendum noted asset liquidation schedule, Yao 1, 2025. He was cashing out before I was even meant to be buried. Ma Cass's voice behind me. I straightened and turned with the easy smile I'd learned to wear around people who think they're in control. "You eating today?" I lifted the stew. He glanced at the screen, flicked it dark, and kissed my cheek. "You didn't have to." "You look tired," I said. "Just a lot on my plate." He opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, then shut it without looking. "Listen about the accounts. It might be simpler if you let me manage your passbooks. I can consolidate everything. Less for you to worry about. You've always been good with numbers," I said lightly. "We can look at it together this weekend." He relaxed half a notch. The receptionist knocked, asked something about insurance forms. While he answered, his phone buzzed on the desk. A banner flashed and vanished, quick as a lizard. "Don't let her make it past Christmas. MV." My breath stuck. He scooped the phone into his pocket like it was nothing, thanked me for the stew, and sent me home with a kiss on the forehead. That evening, he cooked. He rarely does unless he wants something. The kitchen filled with the comfort of roasting chicken and the metallic note of a bottle coming uncorked. He poured Pinot like a ceremony, took the first sip himself, then set my glass by my plate. To new beginnings, he said, to making things easier. I let my words tangle my smile, slip the way someone does when they're overtired. He watched me closely and eased the conversation toward practicalities, keys, bills, the spare car title in the file drawer. I nodded at the right moments and let my hand wobble when I reached for the glass. When he went to answer the doorbell, no one there, only the wind, I tipped the wine into the rosemary again. A medicinal sweetness lifted from the soil like a ghost. "Maybe you should rest," he said when he came back, voice gentle. "Stairs are tricky at night." "Maybe you're right," I murmured, letting my gaze slide past him. He guided me to the couch, tucked a throw over my knees, like I was already someplace else. When he went to the sink, I took his phone from the counter and read what I knew was waiting. From Morgan Scottsdale, invoice settled. Finish tonight or I release the transfers. Another, don't let her make it past Christmas. One more. If you can't do it, I will. I put the phone back where it had been and closed my eyes. I could feel two versions of my son inside the same body, the boy who scraped his knee on a driveway and cried into my t-shirt, and the man who measured me like a liability. Somewhere between those two, fear had made room for greed. Somewhere between those two, someone like Morgan had taught him how to be cruel and call it clean. When he helped me upstairs, I leaned harder than I needed to and let him believe I'd drink the rest of my wine in bed. He stood in the doorway a long moment after I said goodnight, like a person wondering what a ledge might feel like under his feet. He closed the door softly. I waited in the dark until his steps faded, then wrote the date on my palm with a ballpoint pen, 12/01. One day, left on someone else's clock. I set my phone to record, slid it beneath the bed, and lay awake until the house remembered how to breathe. The wind came hard off the ridge on the night the calendar ran out. It rattled the gate and slid cold along the hallway tile. I left one lamp on in the kitchen and set the kettle on a low flame. The doorbell camera blinked its small blue eye. Cass came home near 10 pale under the porch light. He closed the door and didn't move. "We have to finish," he said. Finally, voice shredded. She said tonight. "Pour the wine," I said, and my voice didn't shake. I set my phone on the table where it could hear. "Tell me what you think is supposed to happen." He reached for the bottle with hands that didn't belong to a dentist. "I can make it look like you fell," he said, not looking at me. "The stairs. Or pills." "I don't." He swallowed hard. "I thought I could, but I can't." Glass shattered in the back hallway. We both turned. The kitchen window over the sink spilled a few bright shards onto the counter, and then she stepped through the shadow like a woman walking on stage. Black gloves, quiet shoes, no coat, despite the cold. "Don't, Cass," said his voice a boy's for the first time in years. "You said you'd just scare her." I said I'd make the facts consistent. Morgan answered calm as a metronome. "The medical notes, the supervision, the confusion. Accidents happen. This house has cameras," I said. She smiled. "I cut the wire at the junction. I upgraded last week," I said. "Wireless." Her eyes flicked to the doorbell, then back to me. Then hurry. She moved toward the counter, lifted the knife I use for lemons, weighed it like a pen. "Drop the act, Juniper. You're the only one in this room with options. You can stand still and this ends quickly. Or you can run and it gets messy." The kettle screamed. I grabbed it with a towel and threw a sheet of boiling water toward her face. She jerked back, swore the knife clattering against tile. Cass lunged and froze, trapped between saving me and saving himself. I kicked the blade under the stove and put the table between us. Far away at first, and then closer, sirens wound through the dark. Morgan turned toward the back door, calculating. "You called them," she said. "No, I said." "Maeve did. She gets my doorbell alerts. She saw you." Footsteps pounded on the porch. Morgan spun, seized the wine glass beside my plate, and flung it into the sink where it exploded. "You never could do what needed doing," she snapped at Cass. "That's why you needed me." He sagged into the chair like his bones had run out. "I didn't want this. You wanted money," she said. "You wanted freedom. You wrote checks to buy both. Not this way." His voice broke on the last word. "I can't watch her die." Red and blue light washed through the front windows. A bullhorn cracked the quiet police. "Step outside." Morgan bolted for the porch, slipping on the water I'd thrown. One glove ripped as she caught herself on the frame. It fell to the floor slick with coffee and steam. She vanished into the yard, dark against dark. 2 officers swept through the front. Another cut toward the back gate. I pressed my palm to the wall to steady myself. An officer with kind eyes asked if I was hurt. I shook my head and pointed to the phone on the table. "It's been recording," I said. "And there's another file. Her voice. Names. The money." Cass covered his face with his hands. "I can explain," he said into his palms as if he'd ever believed words could replace acts. "It was supposed to look like an accident. I didn't mean he couldn't finish." "Sit down," the officer told him, and he did. The room felt suddenly too small for all the years inside it. In the hall, another officer bagged the torn glove. The kettle clicked itself off. The house exhaled. A crackle on the radio cut the hush. "Units be advised, female suspect detained at the gas station on Agua Fria. Attempted to leave in a black SUV, bringing her in." I sank into a chair because my legs finally insisted. Cass stared at the tabletop like it might tell him who he used to be. I watched steam bead on the window and slide down into the sink. Mrs. Slate, the kind-eyed officer, said, crouching to my level, "We'll need statements tonight." "You'll have them," I said, and my voice surprised me with how steady it was. I pointed at the contract still open on the office computer, at the forms in the kitchen drawer, at the note in the trash with someone else's city printed on it. "Everything you need is in this house." They led Cass out first. He turned at the doorway, eyes red mouth, working around words he didn't earn the right to say. I looked away. Another officer came back a minute later and wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, though I wasn't cold. Outside, the wind had finally dropped. I set my hands flat on the table where the glasses had been and breathed slow, and even the way I teach scared patrons to breathe when their computers eat their work. In the corner, the doorbell camera's light pulsed a small blue heartbeat, insisting the house was still wired to the world. On the counter, the kettle waited to be emptied. I poured what was left into the sink, watched it disappear, and told myself the same thing I tell strangers who come to the desk looking for a map: start from where you are. Then I picked up my notebook and began writing down every detail while the night was still loud with it, because that's how you make sure the facts outlive the fear. The interrogation room was smaller than I expected. 4 walls painted a dull gray. A single metal table a-hum in the lights that set my teeth on edge. Detective Lang handed me a cup of water, then a flash drive. "You'll want to verify this," he said. "Your friend Maeve dropped it off this morning." I plugged it into the laptop he'd set before me. The files unfolded like a confession recordings, screenshots, photos of contracts, every message I'd gathered, and every shadow I'd chased. "Start wherever you need to," Lang said. I told the story from the beginning: the cracked phone, the scheduled messages, the trip to the rail trail lofts, the wine that smelled like medicine. I slid each piece across the table in turn: the forged cognitive report, the valuation sheet, the transfer from Cass's account to Vail Holdings. Lang's expression didn't change, but I saw him marking every line. "You built quite the case," he murmured. "Librarians," I said, "are trained to keep records straight." Through the glass, I could see Cass in another room, head in his hands. Next to him, Morgan sat, upright wrists, cuffed face like polished stone. When Lang asked if I was ready, I nodded. They brought them both into my room together. The air turned thick. Cass couldn't meet my eyes. "Mom," he said quietly, "I never meant for it to go that far. I just wanted to control me." I finished. He flinched. "You were slipping. You left the stove on. You forgot I forgot nothing," I said. "You wanted my house. You wanted peace of mind paid for in insurance." Morgan leaned back, voice even. He's lying. It was all his idea. I was hired after the paperwork was already done. I told him to stop. Lang turned to her. Then explain the recordings, Ms. Vale. He played the file. Her own voice filled the room. Everything must match the medical file. The sound was so clear, it made my skin crawl. Cass covered his face. Morgan's shoulders twitched. That's manipulated, she said. Lang shook his head. The metadata says otherwise. I reached into my tote and laid out the printed contract. You forged my son's signature here, I said. Cass lifted his head. No, I signed it. Morgan's eyes widened. You idiot. He spoke again, louder this time. I did it. But she told me how. She drafted the emails, she set the dates. She said if I didn't finish, she'd ruin me. Lang stopped the recording. You're both in deep. Conspiracy to commit murder insurance fraud, falsification of medical records. He looked to the door. Bring in Dr. Kincaid. The doctor shuffled in pale paper, trembling in his hands. I can't keep it anymore, he said. She paid me. 10,000. I wrote what she dictated. Mild impairment supervision. I thought no one would get hurt. He slid the confession toward Lang, who read it and nodded. Morgan tried to stand. You can't take my word against. Lang raised a hand. We have bank transfers, Vale holdings to your personal account. We have voice evidence, and now witness testimony. Cass sank lower, his voice a whisper. Mom, I'm sorry. I looked at him. Not the man who'd tried to poison me, but the boy who used to line up his toy cars by color. I said nothing. The choice between love and justice had already been made. Lang gathered the papers, the flash drive, the signed statement. We'll process them separately, he said. Officers stepped forward. Morgan shouted something about lawyers. Cass let himself be led away without protest. When the door closed, Lang turned to me. You did everything right, Mrs. Slate. Without you, this would have gone unseen. I stood, legs unsteady, but mine again. No one should have to prove they deserved to stay alive. Outside, dawn broke over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, bleeding pale gold through the station windows. The night was over, but the silence that followed it felt infinite. 6 months later, the mornings in Santa Fe smelled of dust and sage again. I'd sold the adobe house, bought a small apartment near the foothills. The mountains turned red at sunrise like they'd been reheated from within. The letter from Detective Lang arrived with the first monsoon rain. Morgan Vale, 25 years. Cass, 12, for cooperation. Dr. Kincaid license revoked awaiting sentencing. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and slid it into the back of a drawer. Some facts you don't display. The new place was quiet. I hung my books, alphabetically bought 1 chair instead of 2, and unpacked the box Maeve had brought from evidence, the recorder, the USB, the memory test sheet. On its margin, I wrote with a fountain pen, family observation complete. That weekend, Maeve came by with pastries and the kind of silence only true friends can share. You'll volunteer again, she asked. I already signed up, I said. Thursdays at the library, digital literacy class. In the community room, I showed retirees how to back up photos, how to lock their phones. Make your own passwords, I told them. Don't let anyone schedule your updates or your endings. They laughed, not knowing how literal it was. One evening on my way home, I stopped at the local gallery. Sunlight pooled on a painting I'd loved years ago, the empty frame. A canvas rimmed in gold leaf, nothing inside it but light. Diego once said it reminded him of me. You keep the outlines, let life refill the middle. Now he was moving to Texas, and before leaving, he'd pressed a new flash drive into my palm. This one's blank, he'd said. You pick the password. At home, I placed the drive next to a letter that had arrived from the prison the week before. Cass's handwriting was careful, almost formal. If there's a way back to you, I'll find it. If not, I understand. I didn't reply. I folded it, slipped it into the empty frame, and hung it over the desk where the morning light falls. Not forgiveness, not vengeance, just space, held open for what might someday change. The days settled into pattern coffee. at 6 volunteer shift at 9 walks along the arroyo, when the sky turned the color of old copper. Sometimes I'd pass the station and see Lang on the steps. He always tipped his hat. Neither of us mentioned that night again. One afternoon, as I closed the library, a young woman asked why I bothered teaching strangers about passwords and cloud backups. Because data is memory, I told her, and memory is how we stay alive. She smiled like she understood, though I knew she didn't, not yet. Back home, I sat by the window with the frame glowing in the last light. Outside, a thunderhead climbed the horizon, all silver edges and quiet power. I whispered to the glass the words that had carried me through every file, every night, every choice. Surviving isn't about avoiding death. It's about living truthfully with what you know. The frame caught the reflection of the mountains turning red again. I watched until the light faded, and for the first time in a long while, felt the weight of the past lift, not erased, just properly filed.